Well, I hope that in reading Euripides' Medea that you came away with a really powerful impression of how magnificent a play this is. It's quite ironic because this play was sacked with a third place entry in 431 BC when it was produced. It is possible that it's a depiction of the silly king Aegeus, the one who is induced by Medea to accept her into asylum in the city of Athens, was just probably not the thing to tell the Athenians when they're just about to initiate a huge war with the Spartans, possibly. In any event, this play failed in its day, but it is one of the most popular plays from the ancient Greek world today. In both the actresses Judith Anderson and Diana Rigg were both made dames of the British court and also received Tony Awards for their productions on Broadway of the title character of Medea. This play is simply stunning. The story of Medea as the scorned woman driven by passion to commit this really horrendous murder, a series of murders really, is extraordinarily enduring. I'll discuss it here in some detail, and I'll give you some hints as to what you can do with your point of view, Simon, as we conclude the Greek phase of the course. So, the play, as you saw, starts off actually in a rather surprising way with the nurse. Euripides' plays often do start with a minor character. It's actually distinctive in Bacchae that it's the god Dionysus himself who delivers the prologue. In this case, the nurse does so, and she wishes so sadly that the Argo had never made its way all the way from Greece over to Colchis to try to retrieve the Golden Fleece, because then, of course, Medea would never have made her way back to Greece to cause so much trouble, essentially. So the essential conflict here is that Jason and Medea have ended up in Corinth after they were expelled from Iolcus, Jason's original home city. That happened because Jason, upon arriving back with the Golden Fleece, was denied the proper kingship from his uncle Peleus, so that Medea was then induced to carry out the murder of Peleus with the instrumentation of Peleus's 12 daughters. Medea tricked the 12 daughters into cutting up the body of their father and dumping him into this huge pot of boiling hot water with supposedly some medicine put inside of it, so that Peleus would be regrown as a much younger man. Medea demonstrated this on Jason's father Aeson and also on a ram to make the point. And of course, the daughters believed it and went right through with it. And unfortunately, of course, the result was disastrous because, in fact, there was no such remedy for Peleus. So as a result, Jason and Medea fled. And you'll notice, therefore, that by the time they arrive in Corinth, not only is Medea in exile from her own home city of Colchis, but Jason's also in exile from his home city of Iolcus. So both are in a bad way by the time they arrive in Corinth. When they arrive in Corinth, Jason connects somehow with the Corinthian king Creon and is linked up with the king's daughter, either Glauce or Creusa. Different names are given for this young lady. As a result, Jason decides to break off his engagement with Medea and to take up with the daughter of the king. Medea, of course, is absolutely apoplectic with fury. Now, in the opening scenes of the play, we see that Medea is off stage and the tutor and the nurse are discussing the situation, the tragedy that's unfolding before them, really with a sense of helplessness that, if you observe, really mirrors the helplessness of the chorus back in Aeschylus's Oresteia. Remember the elders who stand around idly when the murder actually occurs of Agamemnon and Cassandra. Here again we have a chorus and two characters who are confronted with a tragedy who simply do not know what to do at this point. So they have to go along and see what's going to happen. So at first, Medea seems to accept her situation pretty much as it is, but then Creon exiles her, although he fatally grants her the one extra day that he shouldn't have. Medea now has to get her plot into motion. She's at first nervous about how she will carry out the plot because she has no place to flee, but that's when, very conveniently, King Aegeus shows up on his quest to find a cure for impotency, and Medea promises him that if she can come over to see him in Athens, she'll help him out with that, and she is granted asylum accordingly. So that's what now sets the wheels in motion for Medea's plot. So now Jason and Medea have a long agon, or debate-like pair of speeches in the middle of the play, in which Jason provides his point of view as to the cultural, societal reasons why he carried out his act, thinking that it was perfectly reasonable, and even the chorus somewhat agrees with it. And interestingly, even Medea doesn't actually oppose those reasons. But what's evident is that Jason really had no business to do that to Medea, and even by the Greek standards, it just simply is inappropriate. So, of course, Medea is infuriated by Jason's refusal to see things from her standpoint, even to apologize. And Medea says everything pretty viciously against Jason, even using this wonderful line in the Greek that goes, which is this sort of snake line that's at the very beginning of Medea's speech, where she says, "I saved you, as all the Greeks know who were on board with you on the Argo." It's a powerful, wonderful sigmatic line that makes Medea sound wonderfully like a snake at that point. All right, so nothing can be resolved, as it turns out. That the 2 points of view are irreconcilable. Well, once Medea gets the asylum grant from Aegeus, now she can move forward in earnest. So she tricks Jason to accepting her decision to agree to the marriage, and also makes Jason accept these two gifts, the robe and the crown, that will be presented to the Princess of Corinth, Jason's upcoming bride. Once she puts them on, we hear from the messenger what happens. At first, they're very beautiful on her, but then the fiery poison starts gradually to eat into her head and into her skin, and she collapses on the floor in agony. Her father runs over to try to help her, gets tangled up with her inside her clothes, and is also himself consumed eventually in the same fiery poison. Whereupon Medea also takes the two children inside after she hears of the successful outcome of her plot, and she slaughters the two children. Once Jason arrives back, he's horrified at everything that has occurred, and that's when Medea shows up very conveniently, Deus Ex Machina, on the dragon chariot from her grandfather. Maybe that's another reason why the Athenians did not like this play. They may not have appreciated how this villainess is able to get away with things. Unlike, for instance, again in Aristea, where Clytemnestra receives a very appropriate divinely inspired punishment for her act of slaughter of her husband. As I say, this is really an extraordinary play. Jason, oddly, is somewhat sympathetic in the sense that he seems to have been a rather naive man trying to do the right thing. But it seems pretty clear that he's anything from totally soft to a complete jerk to an absolute wimp when it comes to Medea. She really rules the day. Medea, in turn, does indeed come off as a woman scorned, but one must never forget in the background that she is in fact a sorceress, even though Euripides does not choose to play up that aspect of Medea all that much. She is actually a sorceress. She is capable of wielding magic arts, and she does eventually use them very effectively. She is a foreigner, and from a far-off foreign country, and of course, a woman has her proper place in Greece, and Medea is clearly not going to sit by to take that. So what you're going to do in your point of view piece is to consider what would happen if Medea were on trial. You want to think in your mind, how would Medea present her own case? How would a defense attorney present the case on her behalf? How would a prosecution case come forward and try to present evidence against Medea? Another way to do it, as you remember, is you can imagine yourself in a school debate with an adversary. How would you present a case either in favor of Medea's act of killing her children or against that act. I hope that you have enjoyed all of the Greek works that you've read up to this point: Hesiod, Homer, the hymns, Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides. And now we have to turn to the final phase of this course, which are the Roman works of Virgil and Ovid. So once you get finished up with your Medea episode, come on back and we will take on the Roman authors Virgil and Ovid. We'll see you next video.